Hey all, this is David Ducker coming back at you, and today I'm going to be talking about empty sandbox syndrome, which is very similar to blank canvas syndrome, except for a GM rather than a player. So let's first off identify what is a sandbox. So a sandbox is a game style where you can go anywhere, do anything, you can head in any direction. Grand Theft Auto style, Red Dead Redemption style, Spider-Man 2, Hulk Ultimate Destruction. A lot of video games have followed this. The original Baldur's Gate was very much sandbox. You could go anywhere you wanted to. So ideally, this sandbox should be full of things to investigate. Dungeons, monsters, people with schemes, organizations with allies and enemies, cities with unique histories and architecture. So what the empty sandbox syndrome is, that is when the GM says, okay, you can go anywhere, you can do anything, go. And you're like, well, what is there? And the GM's like, I don't know. And you're just like, okay, what does the surrounding area look like? And he's like, oh, it's flat. And you're just like, go on, and he's like, yeah, it's flat, and there's grass on the ground. And, they essentially, it's when they haven't given you enough to work with. You have a big, blank, gray, vaguely described world, like walking through a fog or a mist. In character, you don't know where to go, you don't know what to do, you don't know what there is out there. So I've encountered this several times. I could easily pick on Aaron Kenderson. Actually, I was at his game yesterday, and that's what inspired me to do this video, because he was running he wasn't full empty sandbox style, but he had some traits of that, and he has in his previous games as well. But I don't want to pick on Aaron, because I pick on Aaron all the time. So let's pick on Josh. Josh Powers Pullman, the MVP of the Kitchener RPG scene, because he has in the past run an empty sandbox that I was involved in, where he was like, okay, it's a generic fantasy setting, and you start off on the road heading through a forest, right? And I'm like, okay, we're on the road, and I describe my character, who I believe was a halfling paladin who was riding a Saint Bernard, a paladin of low-key. I had flame on my breastplate, a red cloak, and like dark black hair. I remember this character. And so I asked Josh, okay, we're on the road, like where are we going to? And he's like, going to this village here, and he's like, the village is called Eglinton, and yes, you're going there. I'm like, okay, why are we going to Eglinton? What's there? And he's like, it's a frontier logging town. I'm like, okay, well, okay. So he's giving me very little, but like that's just barely enough for me to work with and start to formulate my own plots. And I could have asked him also, like, where are we coming from? Like, why are we leaving this other place? Why are we heading to the frontier? But I could see he was running on the fly. And usually empty sandbox it overlaps with on the fly game master. They've got nothing prepped. That's why their sandbox is empty. It's like the definition of of an empty sandbox is someone who has no prep at all invested. And and vice versa. So we're going along. We finally get to the town, and he's like, okay, what's and I'm like, okay, what does the town look like? And he did a good job describing what the town looked like. And I'm like, okay, well, who is there? I start talking to other NPCs. Like we head into the the tavern, and I'm starting to talk to NPCs like who are the power players in town. And I can see every, and Josh's like, oh yeah, the guy, he tells you about the mayor, and the mayor's name is Heath, and Heath is a logger. He's rich from logging. I'm like, oh, okay. And again, I can see that Josh is pulling it up on the fly, so I always think about your creativity as like a mana bar that refills over time. So every time you create something new, your current level of mana drops, your current level of creativity drops, and eventually you hit 0, and that's when you can't create anything new anymore. It becomes a real pain. And if you're in an empty sandbox and you've got to create, on the fly, you've got to create a town and the town we're coming from and all the power players in this town, you're gonna run out of creativity really quick, and odds are you're not going to be creating the best material as well. So again, empty sandbox style, it's really frustrating for the players. It's resulting from a lack of prep because, so let's okay. Before we contrast, I'll mention again, as a player, when you see the GM on the fly, you're reticent to push him. You're reticent to say, okay, well, the mayor, whatever. Who's the leader of the temple, and what god do they worship? And then get the GM to on the fly create that, and then okay, what about the Thieves Guild? Who's the leader of the Thieves Guild? And what's their relationship with the constabulary? And then get the GM to do that on the fly. And you're like, oh, okay, what about wizards? How are wizards thought of in this town? And just run through and like, oh, what about a merchant house? What's the big merchant conglomerate in this area? And get the GM to on the fly create an actual whole town that's well fleshed out, so you can have a sandbox and a political web. You're reticent to do that because it's stressful as anything for that poor guy. I mean, he did it to himself by not prepping, but it's still very stressful for him to try and make all this stuff and make it good on the first try while the players are all sitting there looking at you. Like, that's a lot of stress. So as a player, then you tend to just ask the bare minimal. I just ask for who's a power player. This guy, okay, I'll go that way. So now we've created an on-the-fly railroad, instead of a sandbox. Allegedly it's a sandbox, but it's so empty. You're going to be in railroad mode, just going from one thing to another that he has actually created. It's not what you want. So okay, now let's come back and contrast. To contrast, the way I would run it, is I would say, okay, you're on the road between these two cities. And I would briefly describe the city. Like, one is a Greco-Roman city, and the other one is more medieval style, let's say. And I'd let the party choose which way, when are you coming from, which one are you going to. Then they go there, and when they got there, I'd describe the architecture and the people walking around, and they'd come in if they started, and I'd say, as they're walking through the town, I'd be like, okay, you see a temple of Zeus as you're walking by, and up on the hill you see a palatial mansion with great pillars supporting the ceiling. That must be the local patriarch's house, and perhaps you see a circle of standing stones off outside the city. That must be where the local druid sect is. And you see a cut purse making his way through the crowd as well. And by his brazenness, you'd suggest that he's a member of the local Thieves Guild. So right off the bat, I'm throwing all this out there. I'm just telling them what I've prepped. I'm like, okay, there's druids over there. You want to talk to them? Maybe. Well, at least know they're there. You want to go to the temple? It looks like a temple of Zeus. Is that interesting? Okay, no. Well, it's still there. You can always change your mind. And you're going to be hearing about it later because it's integrated into the political web. Oh, there's the patriarch's house. You want to visit him? No? Okay. Look, a thief. and clearly a member of Thieves Guild. You want to get in with the guild? Yes? No? Okay. You know, and I'll describe, like, you pass, you know, a large opulent warehouse that has the name of a shipping company on it. You know, you're going to walk by city guards, so you can get involved with the military or the policing. So it's this full sandbox. You could even, like, go in and ask, you know, what is your relationship with your neighboring provinces or neighboring city states? And I'll have that all prepped, and I'll just be like, oh, our relationship is good with this neighbor, but not very good with that neighbor. And then on the other side of us, there's some goblins in the mountains. But we're actually on really good relations with them because they sell us, you know, mithril out of those mountains. So then again, the players can be like, oh, okay, so they've got other cities they could go to and investigate. And each city, you know, is going to have some organization. So maybe the Temple of Zeus, you know, similar temples are going to be in those other areas as well. So the town to the south, their Temple of Zeus, is still in the political organization. They're all the temples are kind of linked up. So, you know, it could be similar plot hooks over there, but with different people involved, which can be fun. Or the shipping company, they could have offices everywhere. So again, you get the same plot hook, same story, just with different people involved. The Thieves Guild, maybe it's an international guild, you know, so like Hell's Angel style. So they could suffuse the local area as well. So you don't have to do that much more work. You've already made the organization. You might have to make the NPCs up on the fly. But by doing the prep beforehand, your mana meter is full. You know, your creativity meter is full. So when you do have to make something, you're still going to have something left. You're always going to need to improvise something. You're always going to need some of that mana for creativity. So save it up. Use it in prep. Then when it regenerates, prep some more. Then drop your PCs into a world, a sandbox, that you fill with cool toys and play sets for them to go around to. Like, that's a full sandbox. This is a great style. Empty sandbox, like I said, it turns into an improv railroad. I can't even imagine a really good GM creating all of this stuff on the fly and integrating it in a political web and giving each one a quest. And I like to give each quest a dungeon crawl that they could do as well. So, and giving it a dungeon crawl. And for each major NPC, I give them a lieutenant as well. You know, so you'll have the high priest of Zeus of that temple, but he'll have a subordinate priest, you know, who may be scheming against him or may be very loyal to him or whatever, in case the main guy dies, or just to add that level of political intrigue, more suspects in a murder mystery investigation. You know, another facet. So maybe the head priest is, you know, he's like the power tripping Zeus acolyte who loves the fact that Zeus just rapes people constantly, and no one can stop him, and he's fooling around on his wife, and you know, that's his Zeus. Whereas the lower priest, his Zeus is like this stern, fatherly, authoritarian figure, you know, who carries the lightning bolt with him and enforces justice. You know, that's his version of Zeus. So you can show off two sides of the cult by having two different priests there. And I'll do this with every organization. The head of the Thieves Guild and his lieutenant. You know, the patriarch and his heir. The captain of the guard and his lieutenant. The local archmage and his apprentice. You know, they'll all be pre-prepped beforehand. So we have this great political web. No matter what you do, it'll impact the other factions as well as this faction. So yeah, do that. Don't do the empty sandbox where you're putting stress on yourself by improving everything, putting stress on your players because they don't want to ask you to improv that much, and but they also don't know what to do. At any given time, they have nowhere to go, nothing to do. Especially if they also have dropped the ball prepping and they don't have any goals or backstory. So, by doing this work beforehand, the game after that fact gets so much better. It's like for every hour of prep that you do, like the game levels up another tier. So it starts like no prep would be like a F, and then 1 hour prep you can get a D level game out of, and then 2 hours C, and then 3 hours of prep maybe you could hit a B. 4 hours of prep you could hit an A plus game. In theory, if the prep was great, the best prep you ever did, if you rolled a 20 on all 4 of those or 5 of those prep rolls, you could get an A out of it. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the empty sandbox, what it is, how to identify it, how to stop it from happening. If you've run into an empty sandbox, if you've been stuck out in the sand with nowhere to go, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Vent, get it off your chest, because we'll be entertained by hearing about it. I will be, at least. So write that in the comments below. If you have any techniques for a full sandbox, rate that as well. I'll do another video on full sandbox, but I love to hear it wherever it is. It's still useful information for me. Maybe I'll steal your info for my video, because the imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So thanks for listening to me ramble, and have a good day in YouTube land, y'all.